Just to let you know, we'll be starting the live stream in about 3 minutes. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Bore da, and welcome to the first broadcast of Talking Wales. Hopefully it'll be the first of many. We're joined here today. We have a couple of special guests who I will introduce now. We have Beth Winter, who was the Labour MP for the Cynon Valley until 2 weeks ago, until Parliament was dissolved or dissoluted, or whatever the word is. And the seat of Cynon Valley is one of the casualties of the reorganisation, and that's something we're going to be discussing later on. David Tristan, who is an academic, former Chief Executive of Plaid Cymru. He's also the chair of the Active Travel Board for Wales. And for those of you who follow David on Tristan, he's also a bit of a geek when it comes to parliamentary constituencies and all things statistics. So, Bore da, Beth, how are you today?
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation today. It's lovely to see David. We've been in school together, so we go back a long way. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion and to have some real political debate. So diolch.
Bore da, David.
Bore da, it was great to get ganged up on here with two former Ysgol Gymraeg Aberdâr pupils ganging up on you. But no, very much looking forward to the discussion and the debate.
Yes, so as I mentioned, hopefully Lena Farhart, who is a town councillor, a Lib Dem town councillor in Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwyrndrobwllllantysiliogogogoch, and a data technologist, will be joining us at some point. She's currently travelling on a train. So as you all know, connections to the internet on trains across Wales aren't the best at the best of times. So I just thought, just a quick introduction to Talking Wales. So I just wanted to sort of just play a short clip that just explains a little bit more about what we're up to and what we're planning to do. We're building a community and we want you to be part of it. A news and information service designed to keep Welsh citizens informed, a space where issues that matter and impact our daily lives can be discussed, developing ideas and challenging those in power. Sharing news and information via digital radio, YouTube, social media and online. Using clear, understandable language. On the platforms you use most often. It'll be owned by you, our members. Serving all of Wales and its people wherever they are in the world. Join us on our journey and help us create a better Wales. And there we have that. So so thank you, Beth and David, for joining us. There's a few things we want to discuss this morning. But the first one, the general election 2024, obviously it's here. It's been around now for 2 weeks. So I'd just like to know a little bit about your impressions so far. Beth, I think starting with you, were you surprised at the timing of the announcements? Because obviously you were there at the heart of it. When did you become aware of the proposed general election?
It was a bit of a surprise, but not totally unexpected. And we became aware that something was happening on the actual day, probably late morning. I think now was as good as time as any from the Tory perspective. They'd managed to get inflation down, but interest rates remain high. So in terms of the hope of introducing a autumn statement where they could give money away, in their words, that was less and less likely. And I don't think that we can underestimate the divisions within the Tory party itself. It's always been a divided party, but I think in more recent years, that has been played out much more in the public sphere, and they really are divided. In terms of initial impressions, where's the politics, I suppose, for me? I mean, the manifestos, the detailed manifestos are yet to be published later this week. But it does concern me about the dearth of proper in-depth political discussion. what we've heard up till now, for me, is tinkering around the edges. The type of political system we've got, a two-party system, the first past the post, it is a foregone conclusion, and we desperately need proper political debate and discussion. Two other things, if I can, Hugh, sorry. Aside from the lack of politics, one, there's been an emphasis, as we predict by mainstream media, on the trivia. Sunak being wet, Starmer talking about change. Yesterday we had the battle buses. But the other much more serious issue is within the Labour Party and the factional, divisive debate, but also the actions of the leadership imposing candidates here in Wales. We saw what's happened to Pfizer and Diane in London. It has really disappointed me what's been happening in the party over the last few days. I'll stop there, Hugh, sorry.
No, it's fascinating to hear your insights. David, how have you found the campaign so far, and what are your thoughts about the timing of it?
I think we could probably have a whole programme on the back of what Beth started us off with there. Let's think about timing for a moment. I always thought there was a chance Sunak could go early, because if you look at some of the financial issues that Beth has highlighted, and the one that really struck me was, with interest rates remaining high, a lot of people are going to come off their fixed rate mortgage deals over the summer months. And therefore, they're going to get clobbered with significantly increased mortgage payments. And that isn't going to predispose them, I think, to the government of the day. And these are probably people who bought homes who maybe have stretched their affordability. Maybe people who in previous years might have considered voting Conservative and are going to be really annoyed when they get these significantly increased mortgage bills. So I always thought there was a prospect that Sunak could go early. It does seem, I think Sir Humphrey, if he was here today in Yes Prime Minister, would say that was a very brave decision, Prime Minister. I mean, a Prime Minister that's 20 points behind in the polls, calling an election is either brave or very stupid, and I think we'll have to await the verdict of the electors to see which he is. But so there's a real question, I think, as to how wise it was to call the election. I think Beth's broader point is really well made. There's a bit of me that wants to take a step back and say, actually, there are a whole set of major problems facing Wales and the UK, whether it's and a lot of it comes post-COVID. We've got real economic challenges, a lot of people either unemployed or underemployed or leaving the workforce early, or in precarious employment. So people are not as secure economically as they were 10 years ago, or certainly as they were 15 years ago. People are poorer, and not only are people poorer, but the divide between the richest in our society and the poorest in society has grown. Yeah, so we've got not only generally are people worse off, but also the people right at the top are doing better, and the people right at the bottom are doing even worse. So there's a big political question there, and I haven't heard anyone talking about that yet, anyone at all. So I think Beth's absolutely right there. And then, of course, how's it gone so far? It could be a very long 5 weeks, because I think what we're going to see is the Conservatives are going to try and pick some of these kind of policies that will attract a particular type of voter. I mean, national service looks as if it was written on the back of a fag packet as a policy proposal, and is designed to try and, there are old people who sort of think the young should the feckless young should be put out to work again, and then Britain will be great again. I mean, I don't think it bears much scrutiny, but that's what they're trying to do. And then Starmer and Labour don't want to do anything at all because they're ahead in the polls, and the lesson they take is if they stay nothing and do nothing, then it'll all be all right. I mean, I think there are some very real challenges with that strategy, and it'll either come unstuck on polling day in some places, or certainly within sort of 3 to 6 months of a Labour government being elected, they could run into some serious trouble pretty quickly. So I think there's a lot going on and a lot to consider in these first 2 days of the election campaign.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that segues quite nicely into our sort of second topic, which is specifically looking at Wales. So, what will be the key issues in Wales, and how important is Wales in the overall election picture?
I think Beth wants to argue with me, or carry on.
No, can I just, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, so Beth, I'll come to you now, Beth.
I just want to come back on I suppose we're focusing on the two main parties here, and I do think there is something of a change in the political landscape across the UK. The Greens gained a lot during the local elections and may get another seat, at least another one in Bristol. And there have been a large number of people defecting, primarily from Labour, to become independents. You've got Jeremy Corbyn standing on an independent platform. And there are others standing as well. Unfortunately, the mainstream media fails to recognise what is happening on the ground. So I do think that there is a change afoot at a very grassroots level, and who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So I think opportunities like this with your platform and others to try and broaden the narrative across a wider political spectrum is much needed. And the other point I just wanted to make, and I think David will talk about this later, is about voter turnout. Now, historically, voter turnout has been much better in national elections, but if we look at the turnout in the local elections back in May, and dare I make reference to the Police and Crime Commissioner election, in my region, 84% of the electorate did not even vote. There's a big issue here about voter engagement as well.
And Hugh, can I just come back very briefly on the back of what Beth was saying about sort of the independents and the Greens, and Plaid Cymru, of course, in Wales.
Yeah.
I think there is that growth on the left. I think what's worrying about the mainstream media is that they seem to be focused on the growth on the right of the spectrum and giving lots of airtime to Reform and Nigel Farage, and not half as much to the Greens, to Jeremy Corbyn, to Plaid Cymru, and to other forces of sort of the green left in general, if you'd like to call it that.
Yeah, and I don't think.
Yeah, and I think that, sorry, because again, we're going to be touching on that again later on. But just thinking, so Lena has joined us. As I say, she's on a train somewhere. So there she is. She's just appeared now. I'll just do a quick hello, Lena. How are you? Whereabouts are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. I'm actually out in Brittany for work, and I'm getting trains between Brest and Nantes today.
Well, there we are. So hopefully the connections in Brittany are a little bit better than they are in Wales. So yeah,
might
so
be better than my home Wi-Fi in North Wales, which is quite impressive.
So look forward to joining the conversation there. So Beth, just from a Wales perspective, then, what do you think are the key issues for Wales, or what would you like to see the focus for discussion over the coming weeks from a Welsh perspective and in Wales?
Well, I think there are two parts to this for me. A lot of the issues are the same for Wales as they are at a UK level. So the key one for me, and David's already mentioned this, is the horrific levels of poverty and inequality that exist. We've still got a third of children in Wales living in poverty, whereas the 1%, the few, you know, their wealth is astronomical on a UK scale. But I mean, the same applies in Wales. Linked to that is the climate crisis. You know, our obsession, continued obsession with growth and focus on GDP needs to change. And we need to be focusing much more on well-being outcomes and indicators. And the approach that we've got economically under the capitalist system does nothing to alleviate the climate crisis. And that is the biggest issue facing us as a society at the moment. The third issue, again, which is related, is migration. We've heard Starmer today come out about cutting migration. It is not an approach that I can support. We need to be welcoming people. Wales, I'm proud to repeat, is a nation of sanctuary. So we need to be encouraging safe and legal routes for people to come here. And with the climate crisis, we're going to see much more drought, much more famine, shortages of food, and more people needing sanctuary to come here. And there's this narrative in the background, this right-wing racist narrative that is driving the debate around migration, and that desperately needs to be challenged. The fourth issue for me is Palestine. We need an immediate ceasefire. We need to stop the arms sales, and we need recognition of the Palestinian state. So they are broad issues, but they do resonate differently in Wales. Unfortunately, if we listen to Vaughan Gethin, we're managing austerity again. We saw the museum demonstration yesterday, and Vaughan has come out and said we've got to make difficult decisions. But when Labour is elected at a UK level, we're no longer going to be able to blame the Tory UK government for austerity. At my local authority level, there are cuts of about £25 million. We've got to stop managing austerity and fight back. We've got the continued extraction of wealth from our communities. We need to be creating and generating wealth and retaining that in our communities. And climate breakdown is a big issue. But as well, and I'll finish on this point, as well as the absence of redistribution of wealth, we desperately need redistribution of power to the regions. And Wales, as a devolved nation, we need constitutional change. And the work of the Constitutional Commission in Wales is an excellent piece of work. We need to be looking at how we can implement that. And I've got serious concerns about the commitment of all political parties at a UK level to further constitutional change. And finally, I will be quiet then, we need honest, principled and trustworthy politics. That isn't there at the moment.
Lena, can you hear us? Yeah. Oh, Lena's disappeared. Let me just go. David, what's your priority? What do you think the priority should be in Wales?
Well, I think Beth set out a set of really important priorities there. Where do we start? Let's start on the Constitution. There are a set of serious, well thought through recommendations in the Constitutional Convention. Led by Laura McAllister, hugely respected, and Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. Like, you can't get two better people to look seriously and objectively and independently at this. They've come out with a whole set of recommendations. So I'd hope to see, I'm not anticipating it being one of the main pledges of, say, Keir Starmer, but I'd hope to see it clearly in the Labour manifesto, for example, that that detailed report is going to be enacted. So I think that's kind of the basics is around the Constitution. I mean, points made about climate change are very significant indeed. I think it is depressing that some of the some of the more challenging and important and forward-thinking work that the previous Labour government in Cardiff undertook. I mean, 20 miles an hour, looking at sort of roads and how we do traffic. I mean, that was radical stuff that seems to have been put on the back burner now. And I think that should depress us all, sadly, and doesn't reflect the scale of the climate challenge that we face. So I'd hope to see a focus on climate change, and I'd sort of hope to see a focus on the economy and poverty. I'm not holding my breath from the mainstream parties, but I think those are the issues that I'd hope to see highlighted, and I think there is an opportunity because we've got a Senedd, a devolved government. There is an opportunity in Wales for us to chart a different course. And at various points, I mean, and Beth will know this more than most, at various points, the Labour Party in Wales has chosen over the last 25 years to chart a slightly different course, and da hynny in it. But that doesn't seem to be the case as of today.
So again, and I suppose this is a point for both of you. So the dynamic between having a Senedd and having a Parliament in Westminster, I find it quite interesting where in Scotland, for example, you have Labour attacking the Conservatives, 14 years of chaos, and the SNP, 17 years of chaos. Whereas, in Wales, we have had a Labour government, obviously in coalition with Plaid at the start. But the comparisons are there, and when you look at the cold hard facts, the performance of health and education in Scotland, I know it's difficult to compare apples and pears, but the things appear to be slightly better in Scotland than they are in Wales. So do you think the discussion around things like health and education muddying the waters, how much of a challenge do you think that is, communicating with the Welsh public? Because obviously you're going to have parties campaigning on issues. Some of them are devolved issues, some of them are not. So how does that dynamic play into it, Beth?
I think having been up in the bubble I call Parliament for the last 4.5 years, it is clear that in particular the Tories really do play on the devolved, non-devolved issue, and any mention of health gets thrown back to Welsh Government. I don't think the mainstream media differentiates anywhere near enough, and as a result, I think the public's understanding of devolution is much poorer than it should be. I mean, for me, because you touched on the coalition agreement as well, Hugh, we need to be building alliances within a Welsh context. We've had that between Plaid and Labour, and it is disappointing, although I do understand maybe the rationale why the coalition agreement has ended. But for me, it's about building a red-green coalition or alliance, for want of a better word, because the levers are there within Wales to be able to chart a different course. It's moving from the rhetoric and the policy to the implementation, and I don't think that we've been particularly good at that critical side of devolution. It's bringing about the change rather than just having sound bites. And I do agree with David that we are at a position in Wales that is quite concerning. Vaughan was clearly Starmer's candidate of choice, and the comments up till now regarding the 20 mile, the climate issues, the roads, but also about making difficult decisions about cuts. That is not where we need or should be in 2024.
David, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of truth there in what Beth's been saying. There's one thing that strikes me about devolution, and you were saying, oh, we can't compare apples and pears. I think we probably should make more effort to compare apples and pears. And maybe this is a challenge to my colleagues in the academic world who do policy analysis and things. But we've got three different, I mean, as of today, we have three different governments running things in England, in Scotland, in Wales. And for most of the last 10, 15 years, we've had three different governments. So logically, you should be able to tell us some differences in what's happening in the health service, in education, in the economy, to see who's doing it right and who's got the right ideas here. And I'm not somebody who says, oh, if it's an idea that's come from England or from Scotland, oh, we don't want any of that here. Well, I mean, we need to find the best ideas. You need to see what's working. If the Scots are doing good work on education that could be replicated in other places, great. If we're doing, I mean, there is one area I think we can take pride in, we've done really good work on, which is recycling. And I hope that continues and develops, and I think others should be following us on that. And if there are areas where England are doing it better, then great. But at the moment, we're not having that, and there may be a role for the media in this, we're not having that kind of policy discussion that says, actually, we're having a real challenge with post-COVID engagement in schools, pupils not coming to school, supporting pupils from less advantaged backgrounds. Across the UK, what's working well here? And what's not working well? And how do we get that right? Because these are really difficult problems. They're not problems that are going to be solved by sort of shouting freedom or sort of or raising the red flag over a school. They're problems that need that kind of detailed analysis that we can move forward for. So I think there's a really, I mean, it's not going to come forward in a general election campaign, but there's a really important job of work there where we say, actually, politics is important and the choices government makes are important. We should see what the impact of those choices are, and we should hold those governments that make a mess of it to account too, whether that's our own or another's.
There's a comment just come in now, so David, your point being a good one, but perhaps suggests the issue to be resolved are managerial, not structural, and therefore political. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think the comparison would allow you to work out whether adopting, my view is that most issues are political and structural, and I think what you'd find is that there are politicians that prioritize different things will have an impact. Having said that, some of it is the management of a policy too. So it's that seriousness and detail in the comparison, I think, that would allow you to get at whether it's structural differences or how things are implemented. Because again, it comes back to Beth's point in a bit. I mean, at times we've had things that are great declarations from the Welsh government, and then very little follow up. And I think we should be honest and clearer about that too.
And Beth, obviously you've been at the heart of sort of decision making. What would your take on that be?
Well, I think I'll reiterate the point I've just made. There is an implementation gap at all government levels, including in Wales. And I again mention child poverty. We've had some really good strategies and policies and a commitment to eradicate child poverty in Wales, but we've still got one of the highest levels of child poverty in the whole of the UK. Something isn't working. And I do think the managerial aspect of government is far more important than we actually give it credit. And the cooperation agreement is another example of some fantastic policy statements in there. How many of those were actually implemented? And there may be valid reasons as to why there was that implementation gap. But let's be honest about that, and let's involve the public in Wales. The political establishment is so far removed from people's lives. We've got to do politics differently. We've got to build a grassroots movement and politicise and educate people about politics. Everybody's voice counts, and we really have got a big job of work to do, but it's not insurmountable in my view. Can I just add one more point, sorry, as well, in terms of the government and devolution, which is really, really important. We have seen a recentralisation of power in Westminster, and whoever forms the next government, in my experience, is unlikely to significantly change that recentralisation that has taken place. And that is very, very worrying. And we've got lots of forums, intergovernmental panels and groupings. They tend to be talking shops. So I think now more than ever, we need to use whatever platforms we've got. One, to celebrate the achievements of devolution, but also about where we go moving forward to ensure that we have proper redistribution of power and wealth to Wales.
Just sharing a comment, Michael O'Brien, saying, we need devolved powers to the Senedd in relation to policing. You only have to see with all the miscarriages of justice that occurred in Wales with no accountability. So this is a classic example, of something that is discussed, sort of over and over again, devolution of justice, but there's a lack of, momentum. David, what do you think is holding back these sort of changes to devolution?
Well, I mean, not to get too political about it. The Conservative and Unionist Party has never been a great fan of devolution, and Beth's party at times has got a good record, and at times has got a less good record, shall we say? So I think there's a challenge in both the main parties there. There is something, I think, that there is an issue that I think could help push things forward in terms of what's happening. But it does illustrate quite how awful things are in the criminal justice system, and that's what's going on in the Park prison at the moment. Yeah. Because it's disgraceful. The number of inmates that have passed away in recent months is unbelievable almost. It's happened, so we have to. It's true, but the circumstances by which a prison seems to have kind of gone off the rails, whatever's going on, there is a major problem there with a privatized prison. And that's sort of UK justice policy. So I don't fundamentally believe we couldn't do a better job of running our criminal justice system and our rehabilitation system better here in Wales, because we do have different priorities and we approach things differently. Our centre of political gravity is different, and that may mean supporting people so that they don't reoffend again, and so that they make a proper contribution to society, rather than locking them up for short periods of time and then doing it again and again and again.
So the next topic, just moving us away from policy, and I think this is something that hasn't really been discussed sort of extensively in the Welsh media, is the changed electoral map. So obviously, there's been a change, and sort of, Beth, you're a direct casualty of what's happened with the reduction in seats. So David, this is like one of your areas of expertise. So can you just sort of explain to the layman, what has happened in Wales from the number of seats and why, and what kind of impact is that going to have on Wales and its voice in Westminster?
Yeah, one of my areas of expertise here. I can send people to sleep very easily over many hours about boundary changes, but I'm not going to do that this morning, hopefully. simply put, the UK government legislated that all constituencies have to be the same size. Yeah. So that's kind of the basic, and that's once you've done that, once you've legislated that all constituencies have to be the same size, what follows is almost inevitable in terms of what happens to the boundaries. Because what the UK government said was, in the past, the Boundary Commission had some leeway to make sure that communities were kept together. And looking to my beloved Cynon Valley was a community and a seat, and though it was smaller than normal, it was held together by the Boundary Commission. Once the government legislated that seats had to be within 5% of electors to each other, then you had a significant fall in the number of seats in Wales, from 40 to 32, and you've had major boundary changes right across the country. So in the northwest, the Caernarfon constituency has been broken up. Bangor has gone to Aberconwy, Caernarfon has gone into the old Dwyfor Meirionnydd seat, for example. If we go down to Dyfed, the old Dyfed, Preseli is now part of Ceredigion Preseli. There's a new sort of smaller Pembrokeshire seat, and then there's a Caerfyrddin seat, which takes in chunks of the old Carmarthen West. So you've got seats over there. And then across the valleys, where you had a number of smaller seats have been completely butchered. So you've now got Merthyr and Aberdare, which isn't Merthyr and the Cynon Valley, because the half of the Cynon Valley has gone into Pontypridd. You've got Rhondda and Ogmore together. You've got Newport West and Islwyn. So there are a number of changes. So there are challenges. And the last thing I'd say, and I mean, I don't think we'll dwell too much on it because Beth's one of our panelists, but I think it's absolutely disgraceful the way Beth's been treated. And someone who worked exceptionally hard for the people of Aberdare. And yeah.
Yeah, and we've shared some comments that come in from people who are viewing the stream, echoing what David is saying about Beth and how much of a loss Beth will be to Westminster. From a personal perspective, I live in Pontycymer, which is in the heart of what was the old Ogmore constituency. So Ogmore made up of 3 valleys: Llanvi, Garw and Ogmore. So Garw and Ogmore have been stuffed in with Rhondda. So we're now in what would be Chris Bryan's seat. Chris Elmore, so his seat was lost. So he's been moved to, he's campaigning in Bridgend. And then the Llanvi Valley has gone over to Neath Port Talbot. So again, you've got, somewhere like Ogmore, there was a distinct sort of unit of 3 valleys has been split up. So Beth, obviously, that you've been sort of impacted directly by this. When did you sort of become aware of, sort of what was going on? Because obviously this has been in discussion for quite some time.
I mean, this has been in the making for many years. So we were all aware pre-election, really. So yeah, it didn't come as any surprise. For me, just to add to what David has said, and diolch yn fawr for the kind comments, but I'm not going anywhere. And is it Tony Benn who said I could probably get more done outside of the Parliament than I could when I'm there. So and politics is in my blood. So yes, I'm definitely not going anywhere, and will use whatever platform I can to promote a fairer, more just society for everybody, because that's what we deserve. But putting my personal situation to one side, in terms of boundary review, the focus and obsession with numbers did nothing to reflect the need, the demographic makeup of these communities or the socioeconomic makeup. So the South Wales valleys are particularly deprived. Lovely, best place that anybody could live. Not being biased there, but yeah, they are. But we've got high levels of need, high levels of socioeconomic deprivation, and the carving up that's taken place does nothing to address, will actually exacerbate those issues, because I know that the Senate are going to be following the same boundaries in the 2026 election. So, you know, it's got all sorts of negative implications and repercussions. And I have to agree with what David is saying about community. We've still got a very rich, and I'm very proud to be always pushed this when I was in Parliament, a wonderful sense of community, not only in the South Wales valleys, but in Wales. And what's been imposed on us by the UK establishment is going to have, sadly, I think, a negative impact on some of that, the detention of that sense of community. So yeah, and if I can just add, sorry, now that I've had the opportunity, most people who are watching this will know the selection process that I went through last year was unfair and undemocratic. And if anybody's interested, I did write a report which I submitted to the Welsh Labour Party asking for an independent review, and I stand by everything that was in that report. This isn't about individuals. This is not about me in any shape or form. This is about democracy, and those people who were involved and had a right to vote in that selection process were not given a fair, balanced, democratic opportunity during that process. And like I said, if anybody wants to see the report, I'm more than happy to share it with them. Diolch yn fawr, Hugh.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I just see now that Welsh Labour Grassroots have issued a statement. They've published it on Twitter at WL Grassroots. But yeah, no, it's interesting, you know, about, you know, the imposition of the candidates in Cardiff West and Swansea West. There's been a lot of you know, talk about that.
Yeah.
And you know, and it is something that potentially, you know, it could harm you know, just, you know, the campaigns, but politics. So yeah, so David.
What struck me about that is that there was at least a bit of me that, I mean, I've expressed my views on what happened in Aberdare, but there was at least a bit of me that thought it was a peculiar local circumstance where the party had decided it wanted to keep someone who was in the shadow ministerial team, and do everything it could to put a process in place to do that. But what we've actually seen over the last few weeks is that it's more structured and more deliberate, and far more widespread. And I think, I mean, so you've got an individual circumstance we saw in Wales 9 months ago, whatever it was. But you've actually now got a far broader spectrum of challenges, and it does come back. I mean, I was saying we might see some impact. I think we'll see some impact of it in the ballot box on July the 4th. But I suspect in the elections that follow, we'll see far more of an impact, and we could well see more independents, more Greens, more Plaid Cymru, sort of that broader coalition of red, green, progressive forces, if you like, doing really well.
And I think it's something, obviously, Talking Wales, we're going to be discussing this in more detail in the future, is the, you know, the changes in Wales with, you know, the new voting system, the closed lists. You know, I think there's a lot of confusion out there about how the new system will work, and, you know, how that is sold to the public. But yeah, no, definitely, you know, what's happening in Wales is interesting. But as I say, you know, is this stuff registering on a UK level? It is on a Welsh level. So just to move on to the final point, because we're running a little bit over time. But yeah, just thinking from, you know, from a media coverage perspective, you know, how does media coverage of the election impact Welsh voters? You know, and are we served adequately by UK media coverage? Beth, you're shaking your head.
Definitely not. I mean, UK media is not only England-centric, but very much London-centric. And having been up in Parliament and having interactions with the UK media, it is clear that they do not understand Wales, and almost have a disregard some of the mainstream media. We treated all regions of the UK almost like a homogenous group. And in terms of the election, again, the overwhelming focus of the mainstream media is on the two mainstream parties, which is Labour and the Tories. And I think it is interesting, as David mentioned earlier, that we saw the EDL in London campaigning, demonstrating absolutely appalling situation. And there is more coverage of that. I do think there are serious risks, though, in the future of the development of a far-right, not only narrative, but movement. And we desperately need to counter that with progressive left forces. I mean, I don't think we can minimise the significance of the far-right. But in terms of the media, the coverage of the left movement is not there. The media is clearly not impartial in any shape or form, and actually the media drives the political agenda. We know at the moment the Starmer, and I'm sure the Tories are courting Murdoch yet again, just like Blair did back in 1997. And again, the mainstream political parties appear willing to water down policies in order to be able to gain the support. So who's controlling the political establishment? Is it political parties? Is it mainstream media? Is it big business? These sorts of things need to be discussed much more. And I have to say, having met you only recently here and done a bit of research on this platform, we need platforms like this, like Novara Media, like Double Down News, much more, and look forward to seeing where this platform goes.
Yeah, and it's quite pleasing. Obviously, this is a very much a soft launch because going back to just about Talking Wales, we were hoping for a November election because that was our plans was to launch then. So this has sort of forced our hand and made us go a little bit earlier, which is no bad thing, and it's a really a good way of launching. And at this moment in time, I believe there's about 150 people watching this. So again, it's 150 people. If those 150 people tell their friends, family, colleagues about Talking Wales, there is an opportunity to grow something. And what we're trying to do with Talking Wales genuinely is to be objective, impartial. I'm a Plaid Cymru member, and we're having conversations, and we'll be having people from across the political spectrum joining us over the coming weeks. But having that cooperative, a media that is actually owned by people, and being accountable to people, I think that's important. But David, what's your view on the media as somebody who does the media rounds as a bit of a media bon vivant and raconteur?
I don't know about bon vivant, but I think I the points made about media ownership and about what media chooses to cover is important. The one difficulty, and I think this is something we need to get to grips with in terms of politics, is that because people have got a broader range of sources of information now and a broader range of places they can turn to for information, making sure that the voice of Wales is heard across those platforms is almost even more challenging than when you were to have a big row with the BBC and ITV, and if you managed to persuade them, you actually would get a bit of coverage. So I think that that sort of dispersed media landscape, while it offers, as Beth outlined, some real opportunities, also provides a challenge, because in order to succeed, you need attractive content, but you also need then cold hard cash to promote those services and to get those services noted. So I think there are challenges there, which hopefully Talking Wales, amongst others, will be in the position to address.
And if you visit Talking Wales, you'll see the web address at the bottom. You can donate and help us with our campaign. But we will be launching a community share issue during the year to help raise funds. So at that point, David, I know you have to go. We've run over a little bit on time, but I just want to say a massive thank you to both of you, David and Beth, for giving up some of your precious time to be with us, and hopefully you'll be back with us over the coming weeks, and hopefully Lena will be joining us. We did see a pop up occasionally, but obviously, you know, the Wi-Fi infrastructure in Brittany isn't as good as we hoped. Anyway, thank you, David, and thank you, Beth, and diolch yn fawr iawn. Hwyl fawr.